Welcome back, everybody. Once again, this is Mark Lawrence, and we're all set to go against the spread on this weekend's college football opening week of the bowl games and the NFL football card. We'll touch base on both of those subjects in just a moment or two with our cast of experts on the show today. Jim Feist will be off this week. Jim is having some difficulties right now with some doctor issues going on, and we wish him nothing but the very best. With that, we're going to welcome in our experts that are here today. Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. Andy, I know you, like me, are busy with your College Bowl report.
Exactly. I love this time of the year. Of course, it's a bit handicapping the bowls, and I don't know how much we'll talk about it, but it's a significantly greater challenge these days than it has ever been in the past. Number one, it's always been a question of motivation. I was actually doing some work, and I think I mentioned it in the newsletter that I sent out last night. You go back to 1970, there were only 11 bowl games. I think it increased to like 25 in 1980, and I think it was like 35 in 1990, and now we've got about 45 or so, including the playoff games. But the issue has always been motivation. When you had 11 bowl games in 1970, it was a reward. Okay, now it's a nuisance and an inconvenience. Combine that with the transfer portal, and it's a much more difficult handicapping phenomenon now. There are still a lot of things that still work, but unfortunately, especially when we're putting out publications, a lot of the information that is significant happens within days of the bowl game being played, such as guys opting out or declaring for the NFL, things like that, coaching changes, etc. But it's still it's a fun time of the year, and I enjoy the bowl games as much as I do the bowls that are a part of the college football playoff.
Well, Andy, you get a pulse for these teams that are entering into the bowl games, and, the first thing we look for, or at least I look for, are teams that are thrilled to be in a bowl game and playing perhaps teams that are disappointed to be in a bowl game that they fell down into, maybe arguably because of a late season loss. So you kind of get the mental psyche of these football teams entering into the bowl. But you bring out a great point about what's happening in the bowl games today. And a lot of that is largely due to what I'm going to call the transfer portal or the NIL. And it's these players who are opting to be sit out of the bowl games from their team because they're going to be prepping themselves for the NFL football draft, or even prepping themselves to move on to another college for a bigger contract. And it makes it really throws another, if you will, wrench into the mix, handicapping these bowl games. So the thing you have to do is you have to really scour through the internet to find out if there are any major defections per se, either coaching or on the player side of the football.
By the way, I'm just going to make one very quick comment without one note. I'm surprised that the first bowl game comes right after Army-Navy tomorrow, and it's actually a very attractive matchup on Saturday, rather. A very attractive matchup between Washington from the Big Ten and Boise State from the Mountain West. That's a very attractive matchup, and I'm really surprised that it's the one bowl that kicks off the bowl season, because that should be a bowl that should be played a little bit later when you get more of the major conference is involved. So not going to, I don't know any reason why it is. Maybe it's just that the LA Bowl got that matchup. That's a very juicy matchup.
Yeah, it's a really nice looking matchup, especially for what you would call a minor bowl per se.
Exactly.
Greg DePalma, Prime Sports Network, the man in the shadows. Greg, how are you doing these days? You getting ready for these college bowl games right around the corner?
Yesterday, when I did my show, it was the first time I spoke. I had spoken since Sunday afternoon, and it was helpful a little bit to get some of that off of my chest. But to be honest with you, even based on what my conversation was like last night to myself and the viewers, I'm at a breaking point with college football right now. It's becoming more and more evident that these things are now just it's either complete and utter incompetence, or there's a lot of rigging going on. Politics, which is the reason why I can't. I thought that the playoffs would solve the politics, because we would have more teams, and I could care less about the team that was left out of a 12-team playoff, because just 3 years ago that never mattered. If you were just take a look at whoever was considered the 12th best team or the 10th best team in 2020, you'd go,
Didn't
that team never would have had a chance to win the national championship.
Four teams back then.
Yeah. And so now it's completely different. Now teams 13, 14, 15 can win the national championship. And so now the politics are still remaining in the sport. And what they did with Alabama and what they did with Notre Dame last week was completely inexcusable and unforgivable.
And by the way, one point to quickly bring up about that, because I didn't hear anybody comment on it. Notre Dame played 12 games against FBS competition. Miami played 11. They blew out Bethune-Cookman, a very mediocre FCS team, and Alabama blew out Eastern Illinois late in the season. You take those two games out of the equation and you compare the stats, and Notre Dame compares very favorably. And of course, they can justify anything they want. Get blown out, lose badly in a conference championship game isn't going to hurt you. Well, it didn't for Alabama. It did for BYU. And the BYU thing allowed the committee to now compare a game between Miami and Notre Dame in September, where Miami won at home by a field goal that in the final minutes of the game, and that game is that is the decision that the committee made, even though they had Notre Dame ranked above Miami with BYU in between for the last several weeks. Those shows that we started seeing in November, they are ridiculous. Don't even have me.
Well, a message was sent. There's no question about that with what happened with Notre Dame in this year's college football playoff. And the message basically was get your ass in a conference and play the same type of games that everybody else plays instead of sitting out as an independent and taking all the money instead of having to split it up with your conference members. That's the message they sent to Notre Dame.
I just wish the ESPN had asked the committee, or someone asked the committee, how could you take a Miami team that only played 11 games against quality competition, or that Alabama did the same thing? How can you justify that against a team? By the way, Notre Dame was under great pressure. They lose game 1 by 3 on the road, game 2 on a missed extra point at home to A&M, who went 11-0 before they suffered a loss. They knew they had to win all 10 games and do so impressively. They did exactly that, and they lost out to a team that only played 11 quality opponents, not 12.
Well, you know what's amazing to me, Andy, if you take a look at this and you're talking like an attorney and you're pleading your case to a jury, you're talking about Notre Dame being in the top 10 every game all season long.
Yeah.
And then here comes the final ranking, the final poll, and they fall out, didn't even play a game, and they fell out to another team who moved up who didn't play a game. So you can argue this case till the cows come home, and I think you can make good cases on both sides of the football. Unquestionably, but I'm 100% positive the message here was to Notre Dame about let's get on board with everybody else here and get into a conference so we don't have these arguments that are coming forward here.
Where would you like to see them join?
Tired of the greed of the Irish is what they're getting tired of. Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to see them join the Big Ten. That would be the natural geographical conference to join.
Yes, it would.
Well, look, I think you're letting them off the hook. I think, again, like I said, this is either deliberately rigged or this is just complete and utter incompetence because of the fact that, look, we saw what happened and we talked about this, Mark, last week, was that Notre Dame fans were a little bit nervous. Why, after barely beating Auburn, a team that didn't go to a bowl, why they moved Alabama ahead of Notre Dame.
That's when they saw it coming, Greg.
Yes. And here's the other thing. So they said, okay, well, we want to, now that that's happened, I guess now we can talk about the matchup. Okay, well, here's the thing, though. A couple things. First of all, you moved Alabama ahead of Notre Dame, and this was the prior week. Well, you had that prior week, you had Notre Dame and Miami already set up basically next to each other, close enough where we could have had this conversation the week before. And then when they are matched up, it doesn't make any sense to anybody why you would penalize Notre Dame when they were in that role, in that top 10 the entire season. Yep. And then you just decide, oh, well, the last possible moment, we're going to now kick you out of that spot because of a game that you played with this team that we could have discussed weeks prior because Miami was close enough. The other thing too is I don't mind Miami. I don't even want to make this a Miami thing. This is Alabama. Alabama has no right being in the playoffs, no right at all. Everybody talked about, well, the only way Alabama can get knocked out is if they got blown out by Georgia. Well, they got blown out by Georgia. Yeah. So you didn't move them down one spot Not one spot did you move Alabama down for getting blown out by Georgia in the SEC, because they know if you move them down one spot, then
they say, well, they won on the road at Georgia earlier. Yeah, of course they did, and that's why you had them ranked where you did all season, because that game had already been played. That was already factored into the first 5 or 6 weeks of the committee.
Yeah, they were just making it up as it went along, and they wanted a narrative. And look, here's the thing with Notre Dame, Mark. They can say, see, this is the reason why I'm not going to go down with that, because they either are so stupid or
selfish.
Because Notre Dame is not ever, at this point in time, with the amount of money they're making with their network deal, they are never going to a conference. They don't care. They will take the losses. And
they play in the ACC in every sport except football, because that's the moneymaker.
And no other team in college football has, matter of fact, no other team in the NFL or college football has the deal that Notre Dame has network-wise. Why would they give that up? Yeah. They're not going to give it up. Okay, you want to knock us out of the playoffs for the next 5 years? That's okay. We're not going to a conference. We're sticking with our network television deal.
Well, I want to tell you how bad the greed at Notre Dame is, guys. I'll share this with you. A good friend of mine, Tom Scott, who was in the industry for a long, long time, he passed away about 5 years ago. He lived in South Bend, Indiana, and my wife Colleen and I would often go to South Bend 2 or 3 times for Thanksgiving dinner with him. And then when we were over there, we'd always attend a Notre Dame football game. Well, we attended a Notre Dame football game, the first one I was at, and we're walking around the stadium, and all kinds of parking on the lawns by homes right around the stadium, because people would rather park there than in the stadium. So what does Notre Dame do? Notre Dame taxes and charges the people who are receiving money income from people parking on their lawns, and Notre Dame goes after them for a piece of that money. That's the greed of Notre Dame.
Did they sue for that? Because I wouldn't think they'd be successful.
Well, I think it was a city ordinance, Andy, and Notre Dame controls that city.
There you go. There's the answer.
That's the answer right there. Okay.
Yeah.
So
now, by the way, the ESPN hurts themselves because Notre Dame is still a national name, and they draw a lot of casual eyeballs from people who are not normally fans, but Notre Dame's playing on New Year's Day, let's go watch this game and have a nice little party. They're going to miss out on that this year. So I don't blame Notre Dame at all for pulling out and making their point.
Well, here's the flip side to this whole thing we're talking about. Let's go to the other side. We talked about Alabama losing and getting in. Andy, I know you mentioned BYU before we got on the show here. Same thing. They were in the top 12. They lost in the conference championship game, and just like
Alabama did.
So what is worse? Is it worse for a team to play well enough to make it to their college football conference championship game and lose the game and be booted out of the playoffs, or not even play in the college football conference championship game? Don't risk that loss and make the playoffs. What's the worst situation? Because Bama and BYU were Bama wasn't penalized, but BYU was in that sense.
Yeah, what the point there is the committee is so inconsistent. It's just like with the NCAA basketball tournament. Although the argument is over team number 68 and not team number 12. But and we've seen this even the old BCS days. The committee can justify anything they want because they'll use argument A to include a team. And then when argument A applies to another team that fits the same criterion, they'll use some other reason to allow that other team to not get in.
Well, Greg, I think the thing that frosts me the most about the Notre Dame situation is the fact that they opted to pick up their marbles and go home because they were shunned and they didn't want to play. And
Andy told you why, and I think it's the exact reason is because who's hosting their game? ESPN.
Yeah.
They're basically telling ESPN to go fuck themselves. We're not going. You're going to fuck us. We're fucking you. That's exactly what Notre Dame said.
Well,
we're not going to allow you to benefit from us being on TV and the advertising that you're going to get
to play in some minor bowl.
Yeah, and then you're gonna fuck us from being in the bowl. No, get the we'll stay home.
They walked away.
Committee, it shouldn't matter, but it does matter. Notre Dame played for the national championship last year.
Yep. And they could have
and drew a lot of nice ratings.
Get in the playoff again this year and won't be. Yeah. And they could have taken that $5 million and kept it all for themselves again this year, which would have been a little more than just parking money.
Yeah. Notre Dame doesn't need the $5 million though. That's part of it as well. Notre Dame can do that and bear the consequences.
Did anybody understand? Because I didn't. I didn't even figure this out until a couple of weeks ago. But I had no idea, because last year, the whole reason that they changed this first system was because of what happened with the Big 12, that Arizona State ended up with a bye.
The Pac-12,
And they decided, okay, well, we can't have that. So now we're going to rank the teams and so forth and so on. And then what happened was, now they had this thing where, where you've got these, you have to be a higher ranked team, meaning that every Power Four champion was not guaranteed a berth. And that was the first step.
By the way, before you continue, Greg, the committee made a mistake. They didn't realize when the Pac-12 left that they should reduce it to the automatic conferences from from 5 down to 4. Normally, that would mean the Power 4, and then you have that one extra spot at the end for a Group of 5 team. Well, this year, because the ACC didn't meet the qualifications, one of the Group of 5 teams was able to get that fourth spot. I'm sorry, the fifth spot would have been there. That normally would have gone to a Group of 5 team. Had they changed the rules for the 2 years that there's no Pac-12 eligible conference, they should have reduced it to the 4 top conferences and the Group of 6, not the 5 top conferences and the Group of 6, because now you had one of the Group of 6 conferences in the top 5 because there's no Pac-12, and then you still had the extra one for the Group of 5 representative. That's why Tulane and James Madison are both in.
Yeah, because nobody wanted Duke in. They didn't deserve it. But here's the problem, is that if you're telling me it's between Duke and James Madison, as big as a proponent I have been all season with James Madison, that was just Group of 5 one bid. How does Duke not get in and James Madison does? James Madison played a Group of 5 schedule.
Yep.
Duke played a Power 4 schedule. So how does the ACC champion, if I'm Duke, then I'm pissed off. Well, wait a second. How am I not in the championship? I want a Power 4 championship.
How did they not rank
James Madison in?
How did they not rank? Well, I guess it's because of the 5 losses that they ranked as low as they did versus James Madison. But that's still your point. Your point is well taken about the strength of schedule. That's why. How could Notre Dame and Miami be so even in strength of schedule when Notre Dame played 12 FCS teams and Miami played only 11? They have to include that Bethune-Cookman strength of schedule factor, which would drop Notre Dame down, I'd probably say 10, 15 places just on that one game.
And aren't we supposed to? Isn't home field matter? Why, when they keep talking about Notre Dame and Miami, does anybody not bring up the game was in Miami? That's not a fair representative of, well, Notre Dame couldn't beat Miami. The game was in Miami. Yeah. I mean, if that doesn't matter,
and they lost
why do we have neutral site bowl games though? Why don't you just go ahead and like the NFL and everybody gets a home game every round of the playoffs?
They lost on a last-minute field goal. So basically, if this game were at a neutral field and they played the same game, it'd basically be a tie game because of the 3 points that Miami gets at home, if you look at it that way. Now, obviously, it's not going to be a tie game or anything, but that's the point that I also argue, Greg. You're absolutely right that Notre Dame should not have been penalized by losing one game by 3 points on the road in the final minutes in the first week of the season. And by the way, my understanding is they only brought that head-to-head competition up because the teams were side by side in the rankings, and BYU was no longer in between them because apparently you only use the head-to-head if you're ranked like 10 and 11 or whatever it was. That's when you bring it up. So the committee dropped BYU for the purposes of having Notre Dame and Miami head-to-head and being able to choose Miami, which I can understand because you did want a representative from the ACC in there, but that was not the way to do it.
Well, guys, normally we start the show off covering the NFL and taking a tour of what's on tap this week, and then move on to the college. But with Jim Feist being off this week, and we do it largely, one, to accommodate Jim, and also because everybody wants to know what Jim has to say about the NFL. He's an absolute master when it comes to information and handicapping. But Jim is off this week. So as we're talking about college football, let's keep the ball rolling with college football, and then we'll go over to the NFL portion in the second segment of the show, if you will, so we don't have to break stride per se. I'm going to ask you about the college football here, that as we get into this, we're publishing our college football playoff bowl guide. Andy and I talked about that. It's going to be ready tomorrow on Friday, broken down into 2 issues this year, like last year, because we can't do every game in one issue because we don't know who the matchups are for the semifinals and the championship game. So it has to be broken down. But nonetheless, from the College Bowl guide, I want to share this with our listeners out there. And this is a pretty unique stat that I came across here. And there are only 2 bowl teams that rank in the top 10 in the country this year in both total offense and total defense. And those 2 teams also out-yarded their opponents by 150 and 134 yards, respectively. Don't be surprised if the 2 teams I'm talking about meet in the college football championship game, and I'm talking about Indiana and Texas Tech. That's the powerful numbers that these 2 football programs put up this football season here, just dominating from start to finish in every football game they played. Any thoughts you might have before
by being seated 2 and 3, they can meet in the championship game because they're on the opposite sides of the bracket.
Yes, exactly right. So, I think that's going to be intrigue. If you follow statistics and you want them to help carry some of the weight into your handicapping, that's sort of what stands out unique-wise to those 2 football programs here. But there is one other team.
By the way, it's 1 and 3. They're seated 1 and 3. Indiana 1 and
1 and 3.
Texas Tech 3. Yeah.
Texas Tech.
There is one other team that's playing.
Are they 4?
Yeah, Texas Tech and Indiana would play in the semis.
Oh, they would meet in the semis.
Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot. They should have ranked Texas Tech ahead of Georgia, but that's okay.
So we'll say the college football semifinals, okay?
Yeah.
But if they meet in the semifinals, my argument would probably then be the winner of that would likely win the college football championship because they'll continue with their imposing statistical dominance over opponents. One other interesting note I'm going to share with you guys before I turn it over to you for your observations on these college football bowl matchups here. And this one sort of jumped off the page to me. We break down every team in the bowl guide of how they played regular season and against other fellow bowl teams this year. And there is one team that has played 7 bowl games against 7 other bowl teams this year, and they won the stats by an average of over 250 yards a game in those games. And they are a 20-point bulldog, if you can believe that this week. Any ideas who I'm talking about?
The only one I can think of is James Madison.
There you go. Bingo. James Madison. He's the guy. I know he beat up lighter weight bowl teams because they come out of the Sun Belt Conference, but a bowl team is a bowl team. A bowler's a bowler's a bowler's a bowler. And that's what James Madison is going to take in that Oregon football game. They will not be at all intimidated by this Oregon football team. I can assure you that. Any thoughts, Andy, you saw? What caught your interest the most about these pairings or what didn't happen? We talked a little about what didn't happen with Notre Dame, but any other thoughts? One thing before I hand it over to you, I was a little bit surprised to not see Iowa State in the bowl game this year. And I don't know if that's because Matt Campbell opted to go to Penn State or not.
They turned down their invitation for one of the bowls because of the coaching change.
Because of the coaching change, okay.
Kansas State did the same because Kleiman is retiring. So, and they were fined. What was it? I think $500,000 by the Big 12 for not accepting the invitation.
Yeah, because it cost the Big 12 money is what it did.
Yep. Yeah.
So they'll get it one way or another. But any other thoughts you had, Andy, on the pairings that you saw in the bowl games this year?
I haven't done a lot of work on the bowl games because I think I mentioned before we started that I wait for Army and Navy to finish their season so I can get all that so I can get all their regular season data incorporated, and it'll have a minor effect on some of the games as far as rankings go and certain statistics against mutual teams and all that. But I liked most of the matchups. I mentioned I thought that having the Boise State-Washington matchup kick off the bowl season was a bit too attractive of a matchup to be played the first. You'd like to see and nothing against these conferences and nothing that says they're not going to be good games, but you like to see games between Conference USA, Sun Belt, Mid-American, even Mountain West Conference teams, the group of 5 out of the way first. I like the American Athletic, the AAC as a conference. I'd actually have them as in between the Power 4 and I guess it would be the group of 4, the other 4 without them. They're sort of like a mid-major, let's say, and if you call the other group of 4 conferences that I just mentioned low majors, and then the Power 5, the majors, I would like to see that. I'd like to have seen more of the weaker teams play early, so it builds up a lot of enthusiasm for when the SEC teams and the Big 12 teams and the Big 10 teams begin their participation. But I do like a lot of the matchups. Tennessee, Illinois is an interesting matchup. Michigan and Texas. With apparently some interim coaching for Michigan. That's an intriguing matchup. So a lot of those matchups that we build up anticipation for, I do like much of those matchups, and I do like the Alabama playing Oklahoma for the third time in the last year and a half or so, with Oklahoma 2-0 against Alabama. That's an intriguing matchup, and that's a matchup where I think the pressure will be on Alabama to prove that they did belong in the college football playoff despite the controversy. But if they lose for a third time to Oklahoma and a second time this year, that might raise some questions and might prompt some changes. I would think the most likely change will be, and you're still going to have arguments over who team number 17 should be, is that we may see the field expand to 16 teams sooner rather than later. And by sooner, I mean perhaps within the next 3 to 4 years at most.
Well, that's a lot of what Notre Dame is forcing. The hand they're forcing is a 16-game expansion with what they pulled this year. And I'm sure we're likely to see that sooner than later. Greg, I mentioned about teams that are in bowl games that maybe perhaps it's not the bowl game that they desired. And I'm going to throw one out there at you, and you tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong, okay? You got a team that's in a bowl game that started out the season 7-0 to begin the season. And now they're in a minor bowl game. And this football team played 6 other bowl teams this year and didn't beat a one. Georgia Tech is who I'm talking about. There was a lot of good vibes about Georgia Tech early on in the football season. They lost, and then all of a sudden, Georgia Tech started being exposed, if you will. 0-6 in the yards is what I'm talking about. They didn't out-yard a bowl team all season long. They were outstatted. Do you feel Georgia Tech could be in a letdown, don't want to be in the Pop-Tarts Bowl this particular bowl season when they take on BYU, or is BYU more let down than Georgia Tech is in that game?
No, I don't think BYU. I think BYU has got the type of program that they're going to want to go out there. They did it last year and kind of prove that they belong. So I think if one team's going to take it more seriously than the other, I definitely would side on BYU, especially like you said, Georgia Tech's defense. I don't know what the hell happened in the Georgia Tech-Georgia game. That's a mystery. But pretty much every other game that they played down the stretch, their defense was just pretty damn awful. So, yeah, I would say BYU would be the team if I was going to look at that matchup. I think there are some decent matchups this year because they finally decided to put some logic to it. Like, for instance, you've got Troy and Jacksonville State. Those are the runner-ups in their respective conferences. You've got a really good matchup between maybe 2 of the second-rated teams in their conferences, with Old Dominion playing South Florida. And then you also have the MAC champion playing the Conference USA champion, Kennesaw State and Western Michigan. So I think they did a good job there. And then there are some other decent games. Cal and Hawaii looks like a pretty decent game.
By the way, before you get to this one, Greg, I'm going to just interrupt for this brief moment. If you follow college football, except when the NFL season starts, you sort of put things to the sideline and you don't pay as much attention to college football and you're concentrating on NFL, and you took a look at the bowl match and your first thought would have been, oh, wow, the number 1 team in the country against number 3. What a great game between Penn State and Clemson.
Yeah. Great. Early on, right?
Yeah. That's how they started the season.
Yep.
And then another really intriguing matchup would be North Texas and San Diego State, because you get one of the top offensive teams in college football going up against one of the top defensive teams in college football. So I do think there are some decent matchups, but let's be honest, the whole bowl thing is pretty much garbage now. And they're embarrassing themselves by actually saying that these playoff games are bowl games. Nobody gives a crap anymore about it. Just doesn't make any sense to do it like that. They're not bowl games. They're playoff games. Nobody recognizes them as bowl games except the NCAA and whoever gets money because they're sponsoring the game itself. So that's something I think they'll eventually have to figure out a way around that. Maybe I still think it's better to maybe, if you want to keep the bowls, keep them just for like the first round games or something like that, or have one less regular season game so you have an extra week because you are going to need it with a 16-team playoff. and put those games and make sure too to keep some rivalries in there if you can, because even like, does anybody really want to watch an SEC team against a Big 12 team in the Rose Bowl? It makes no sense. It's just, nobody cares about that. So, and that's a shame, because that's the tradition that the NCAA has destroyed on its way to these playoffs. Now, and I was all for the playoffs. I just didn't think that they just did along the way that they would absolutely destroy the tradition too.
I could understand the matchup in the bowls of Alabama and Oklahoma, but why does Mississippi and Tulane get to play a rematch of a game that was decided by 35 points earlier this season?
Well, that's the other thing, is that like you were mentioning college basketball, and the one thing that they can do, because there are so many teams, is they can manipulate the matchups.
Yeah.
They can't manipulate the matchups in football, and that's a shame, because like you said, I don't want to see Alabama and Oklahoma again. I'm bored with that matchup. Yeah. Like you said, I don't want to see Ole Miss and Tulane. And by the way, if Ole Miss wins, they got to play Georgia. They just played them earlier this year. Yeah. They're playoff games. I don't want to see SEC. Now
why did they rank Ole Miss ahead of Alabama in the first place? Why didn't they? Yeah. Why did they rank Alabama? Did they rank Alabama ahead or behind Ole Miss?
No, they were behind.
Okay.
Yeah, and Ole Miss. That's the thing too. Just a couple of years ago, they knocked Florida State out of going to the 4-team playoff because they didn't have their quarterback. Okay, so basically you penalize Florida State. Okay, fine. Whether I agreed with it or not, which I didn't, I understood why they did it. So then why aren't you doing the same thing to Mississippi? Why doesn't Mississippi get knocked down a couple of notches because of the fact that they're not going to have, only their head coach that's going to be not allowed to be on the sidelines? So see, again, it's the same old ridiculous nonsense. Is they'll do what they want to do. But that's the thing I don't like, is I don't like the fact that Georgia will more than likely play Ole Miss. And that means we're getting 2 SEC teams. Well, what does that prove? We're not supposed to see SEC teams against SEC teams. We need to see the SEC against another conference team. But if you say, well, there are 5 teams in the SEC, well, then there shouldn't be 5 teams in the SEC. That's why Notre Dame should be here and not Alabama.
Yeah. And by the way, one other point there, as far as the 2 teams, James Madison, Tulane. We already saw Tulane against Mississippi. Well, Tulane and James Madison were the last 2 teams in, so why not have James Madison play Mississippi and Tulane play Oregon?
We could do that, games. But then again, the whole thing is we can't move James Madison ahead of Tulane because Tulane is ranked ahead of them. Doesn't that just include them? They could have switched the rankings around a little bit for the seeding purposes. That was just for the selection, I believe. Wasn't it? You would have hoped. Yes, you would have hoped they would have been. But again, just like you guys also mentioned about not including Notre Dame and all the marketing that they're losing out on. Well, we talked about the same thing with Vanderbilt. Just imagine if you left out Arch Manning, Notre Dame, and Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt from these playoffs. Yeah. How absolutely dumb can you be to leave out 3 of your most marketable teams?
One of whom might win the Heisman Trophy.
One who could win the Heisman Trophy, and the other 2 who could win a national championship. And you left them all out.
The intriguing thing to me, Andy, you mentioned about Tulane and Ole Miss meeting in a rematch, is it's not only a meeting and a rematch. There's a storyline to this whole thing. And the storyline is that Lane Kiffin bolted from Ole Miss and John Summerall decided to stay with Tulane after taking the Florida job. Which of these 2 football teams you feel is going to be more geeked up for this game? The guy that got clobbered and his coach wants to come back and lead them to the promised land, or the team whose coach bolted on them and left them in the dark?
Both teams will be highly motivated because I think Tulane understands Summerall moving up to the SEC. Ole Miss obviously will be motivated because, we can win without Lane Kiffin, because Lane Kiffin doesn't block, tackle, catch, or throw passes.
Let me ask you this also. Did Charlie Weiss sign on with Ole Miss?
Junior.
Charlie Weiss Jr.?
Senior.
No, I thought Junior was on one of the coaching staffs.
Well, Junior's on the coaching staff, but I had been hearing rumblings about Charlie Weiss coming back and maybe taking over that program.
No, that I didn't hear.
the Notre Dame coach, the NFL coach, so
Yeah.
forth and whatnot. I was just curious because he hasn't been on NFL radio for now the past year, and I know he's looking probably for work. And would that be a surprise to you if Charlie Weiss Sr. took over that program, or would it be a step backwards, you feel, for the Rebels?
Well, with his NFL connections, it probably wouldn't be much of a negative. That he's been out of the game coaching for a while, perhaps might be. But just like Lane Kiffin had those NFL connections. O'Brien at Boston College has those NFL connections. Saban Belichick at North Carolina has those connections, and that I think often can be a good recruiting tool because of those connections.
Yep, I agree 100%. I agree.
And now there's now the thing is though, does Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator, I mean, does he now, is this his, you would think if they win a few games, they might just seamlessly. Now, I haven't heard that. I mean, have they pulled the interim tag off of Golding? Have they just given him this job? Because
I haven't heard that. The guy who's gotten screwed in all this was, who is it, Wilson at Penn State?
Who's that?
Oh, the Kevin Wilson, or not Kevin.
The interim coach at Penn State?
Yeah, that was never really going to work out because he was more he's very well liked at Penn State, and he's more of a really good recruiter, and that's all he really was. And I think everybody understands that what happened at Penn State though towards the end was just a sort of like what you just mentioned with Ole Miss. Penn State did exactly what Ole Miss is going to try to do. Is their coach is gone, but they still will rally around and try to compete. They still have the same players, except of course Aller being out with the injury. Yeah. So I could see Ole Miss doing the same thing. Matter of fact, the thing with Ole Miss that I like more than anything is you're getting great value with Ole Miss. You're getting Ole Miss at 25-1 to win the national championship. So they're basically saying, well, by taking Lane Kiffin out, I guess Lane Kiffin, I think Ole Miss was somewhere close to 15 to 10-1 when Lane Kiffin was around.
Probably.
Now I'm getting 25-1. So I think that's not a bad option, to tell you the truth.
Provided they get past Tulane, yes.
I hope so. Yeah, that's for sure.
Exactly. The only thing that can keep Mississippi from not getting by Tulane is too much overconfidence because they played them earlier.
Well, that's for sure. I mean, they're not going to be really geeked up as much as they possibly should be for this football game, just knowing they've already gone through the motions and pummeled this football team once. And I think that
a lot of the country will be rooting for Oklahoma to beat Alabama for a third time in a season plus.
And it does look like Golding is the head coach. So he is going to be taking over the program. So he doesn't have a great, obviously he doesn't have any sort of track record, but probably the best way to just smooth, sort of like what happened with Michigan with Sharon Moore. Just he's there, he's an assistant, he's helped recruit. It's a seamless thing. Let's not screw this up because we don't have time to hire a new head coach anyway. If we do it, we'd have to wait 2 or 3 weeks after the cycle. And they just decided this would probably be the best way of moving forward. And it might be. I mean, look what happened with Michigan and Steve Fisher. When he took over the job. And I'm talking about basketball and a long time ago, but it sure worked out for them that one season when they won the national championship when he took over as an interim coach at Michigan. So it can be done.
Well, guys, we got to put a little bit of a condensed show together here today. So let's move over to the NFL side of the football if we can. We'll be speaking a lot more in depth next week when the college football games begin. Andy has his bowl guide ready. I have mine ready, and we'll be able to tear it apart, per se, as you will. Before we get into the NFL football side of things, I want to remind our listeners out there that the ProLine TV channel, click on the join button where you'll find Jim Feist, myself, and a bundle of perks and a team of experts. Visit our community page where you can pick up picks and selections from Jim, myself, and all of our experts at wholesale prices. Just visit the community page, if you will. It might be the best move you'll make this holiday football season. Now, before we get into the NFL football, I want to point out a couple of things from the midweek alert, as we usually do before we begin the NFL games. And I'll start it off with my usual. Might put you to sleep, but I want to do it anyway because it's important to me. 5 NFL teams rank in the top 10 offensively and defensively coming down the stretch. We had a change of a couple of teams moved out. A couple of teams moved in. Buffalo Bills are now in that double top 10 list, as are the Green Bay Packers, the Kansas City Chiefs, who still stay in there despite their struggles. The New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks are the teams that are all double top 10 football teams. Tennessee's still the only team in the league that has yet to win the stats in any football game. 0-13 in the stats thus far this football
Has that
season.
ever happened before?
I don't know.
A team has
Randy.
gone throughout the entire season.
That's a great question. I'm going to see if I can go back into the old time machine and see if I can find that. But
and the funny thing is, Tennessee's played very well relative to their, they were losing games by 20, 30 points early in the season. Now I think 5 of their last 6 losses have been by 7 points or less.
And do you think that might be other teams playing down to their level at this point of the season?
Possibly. It could be. It bit Cleveland last week.
Yes, it sure did. Now, I know what Cleveland. I don't know if Cleveland has a gear to step down to, from where they are. But it was sure nice to see Tennessee pick up that win, even though I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. Now, if the NFL playoffs started this week, the number 1 seeds would be the Denver Broncos and the LA Rams. Jim Feist's team, the LA Rams. The number 8 seeds on the outside looking in would be the Colts, who have all kinds of problems right now, as we know. With Phillip Rivers, we'll be talking about him joining the team this week. Whether he'll be starting behind center remains to be seen. I kind of think he will. And also the Detroit Lions would not make the playoffs if they started this particular week. And in fact, the AFC wildcard pairings would show number 2 New England hosting number 7 Houston, number 3 Jacksonville hosting number 6 Buffalo, and number 4 Pittsburgh hosting the LA Chargers. On the other side of the ball, the number 2 Green Bay Packers would host the number 7 Chicago Bears, who were the top-seeded team last week. They take a loss and they fall all the way down to number 7. That's how wild and woolly things are in the NFC wildcard playoff race, or the wildcard playoff picture as we go into this weekend. Number 3 Philadelphia hosts the number 6 San Francisco 49ers. And finally, the number 4 Tampa Bay Bucks. They sit on their roost as the top team in that division, and they probably won't be moved out of there as long as they stay right there, even though they're playing absolutely horrible football. They would be hosting the Seattle Seahawks, and right now, if they played this week, they'd be a sizable home underdog in that game.
Yep.
So, guys, with that being said, I want to ask you, Greg DePalma, what game catches your interest the most on the NFL card this week?
Okay, let's see. If I had to just pick one game, I mean, the Buffalo Patriot game, I think, does stick out based on whether or not Buffalo is going to, or really if New England is going to be able to continue this winning streak that they're on. You figure it's probably time, just like Chicago last week, sooner or later. Winning streaks all come to an end, and sweeping the Bills is not going to be easy. So if New England was able to do that, I'm not sure if I'd be either more impressed with New England or if that would almost be like, all right, yeah, I just can't believe in the Buffalo Bills at this point. So that might be the one that probably sticks out the most, especially if we're talking about the at least for me, for the games on prime time. And I understand that there's, of course, the other big game between Detroit and the Rams. That's also going to be really intriguing. So those are a couple of the ones that you got 1 o'clock, you got 4 o'clock. And I guess that's the good thing. At least they're splitting them up that way. And now that there's no buys, isn't it strange to take a look at the amount of games that there are on TV at these times? I mean, there's so many games, even at 4 o'clock. I was going through all the 1 o'clock games and I was going, oh, I guess there's only going to be 2 or 3 4 o'clock games. Now there's like 5 4 o'clock games or something like that. So that's great. It's good. I'm glad to see that there are no more buys.
Yeah, well, the buys being in the rearview mirror is that time of the year that should be. I mean, goodness, we're after Thanksgiving.
It's like the first few weeks of the season.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like bookends, if you will, in that sense per se. Andy, any game that you think is intriguing that catches your eye? I have one particular one I'm going to share with you, but anything that you caught your eye for this particular week?
Well, there are a few. Obviously, Baltimore-Cincinnati is an intriguing game. The game between the Colts and Seattle, because you could have, I believe that second grandfather to play in an NFL game. I believe the first, if I recall correctly, was Brett Favre with the Vikings back in 2010. And I thought the interesting fact of the week was that Phillip Rivers' son, I believe it's the father of his grandson, is older than Sam Darnold.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
That's the amazing thing. But the one that I will choose for Green Bay, Denver is an intriguing one, but I'm going to go with Detroit and the Rams.
You're stealing my thunder, Andy, but go ahead with it.
I'll give some quick comments on that because this game is not as important to the Rams as it is to Detroit, because I think the Rams control their destiny as far as winning the NFC West. Now, if they win this game, they can clinch a spot in the playoffs, but not the division title. That could come next week against Seattle. Assuming that Seattle, San Francisco, and the Rams win their two other non-conference game or non-division games, and I believe the Rams play Atlanta and one other, I think Arizona, which is a division game, but it's not of a quality opponent. So I believe that if there were a three-way tie atop the NFC West, the Rams would hold the tiebreaker over Seattle and San Francisco. It would be against Seattle because of sweeping the season series. They beat Seattle earlier, and it would be over San Francisco, who splits the season series, I think, because of the best record within the conference. So the game is not as important. It's still important for the Rams, and I actually have them winning this game, but I do have Detroit covering in this game, because Detroit, if they lose this game, they're going to have a very, very hard time making it as a wild card, because they're not going to win the NFC North.
I agree 100% with you, Andy. That's the game that intrigues me the most. There's some good quality matchups on the NFL football card this week. We finally have matchups of some winning teams playing one another as opposed to dogs playing dogs. And Detroit Rams obviously checks that particular box. Andy brings out a lot of good points about this matchup. Detroit needs this game probably something close to like a vampire needs blood right now, because if they don't get it, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to make the playoffs. They're coming in here also in this football contest with Dan Campbell, the master, if you will, in college football games when he comes into the games off of a loss.
NFL games.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah. And master also in non-division games when that team is coming off a win in his career. He's 23-6 to the spread, 7-0 as a dog. It puts him in a lot of nice roles this week, are the Detroit Lions and Dan Campbell. And the Rams have played some really, really good football. There's no question about that. But at what point do they keep their foot on the pedal here? And I see them perhaps maybe not looking past Detroit, but perhaps maybe looking more ahead to Seattle next week. That's a big game for the LA Rams next week. The biggest game for them probably this football season here. So I think Detroit holds the most interest and intrigue, and they've got to stop the bleeding there in Detroit this particular week. That's my take on the NFL.
I'm going to give you one more intriguing matchup, and that's the Green Bay-Denver game. Green Bay is off of 3 straight division games. They won all 3. The last one against Chicago. And who do they play next week? They have the rematch with Chicago. This is about – I don't know if spots get much flatter than they do here with Green Bay playing a Denver team, which I think they may have the Chargers up next, but certainly it does not compare – it pales in comparison to Green Bay, although Green Bay has a reason to show up here, even if it's a flat spot. They control the number 1 seed, the seed in over Chicago after covering it. They will I think they might pass the Rams if the Rams were to lose to Detroit.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring out there about their scheduling right now for the Green Bay Packers. Are playing some really good football now, and you've got a Denver Bronco football team, the number 1 seed in the AFC, who's a home dog in the football game, no less. So we do have, as I mentioned here, to open up this segment here, some good quality football games. And we didn't even talk about the New England Patriots. They're a home dog against the Buffalo Bills, who may be back. I don't know. I think they're priced more on name and reputation than anything else. Coming into the football game, we're going to find that out. I still don't like that Buffalo rush defense. It gives up yards in droves, and you can't do that if you want to win against good quality football teams. That's kind of my thought in passing there. But one intriguing game here, guys, before we wrap up this segment or the show this particular week, and I did a little deep dive research into this, and kind of interesting. Monday night, Miami goes into Pittsburgh to play the Steelers in a game that's supposed to be 19 degrees at kickoff time, which will be about 6 degrees wind chill factor. And now you got the frozen fish Miami Dolphins in Pittsburgh, and Tua Tagovailoa has never won a football game in a game where the game time temperature was freezing or less. Greg, do you think that Pittsburgh can finally step up and play a complete decent football game given the circumstance that Miami's in, or is this winning streak that Miami's in on right now for real? What's your thought?
Yeah, this is another situation where even though it's not as long as a winning streak as some of those other teams we mentioned, it's about time. Miami's reached their limit. They're playing a team coming off their biggest win of the year. And let's keep in mind, too, that Pittsburgh just is now coming off a stretch over their last, I think it is their last 7 games this year. 6 of them were versus winning teams.
Yep.
So they've played some really tough competition. They've beaten the Patriots. They've beaten the Colts. They had their big win against Baltimore last week. So I don't think they're a veteran team, but and I think when you go through the doldrums of a long season, then I think we see some of the patches where the Steelers haven't necessarily been their best. But now we're coming to crunch time, and this is when veterans pick up the pace. This is when guys like Rodgers and Watt, this is when the best players basically come to play, Ramsey and so forth. So I think Pittsburgh will definitely show up, and I can't imagine this is not going to affect the Dolphins. It like you said, it's not just affected Tua, but it's usually affected the Dolphins franchise period,
yes.
being in these types of games. And the fact that it's a night game and the fact that Pittsburgh needs the game really bad. I think Pittsburgh's I feel they're actually my second best pick of the week. I'm a little bit concerned with the point spread a little bit because I could see Miami hanging in because they've been playing their best football of the year. But I think Pittsburgh's the way to go.
I'm going to add some information to that'll make you feel a little bit better. And then I have a question for both of you to answer because it could come up in the playoffs. Who did Miami play last week? New York Jets. Yes. After playing the New York Jets this year, teams
we're still on that.
Yeah, which in the case would be Miami. After playing the Jets, teams are 3-9 straight up. Okay, they are 1-11 against the point spread, and they are 10-2 to the over. So Pittsburgh and the over, based upon the New York Jets, might make some people feel comfortable. But getting to something a little bit more serious, and it's an interesting handicapping question that we may be faced. Let's say Denver and New England meet in the playoffs. Let's say, based right now, it could be for the AFC Championship. Which would you consider a more favorable situation? New England having won quite a number of games by margins this year, or a Denver team that happens to win so many close games that they're very used to and very confident, very comfortable in eking out wins. So you've got a team that is accustomed to more so winning by margins, playing against a team that rarely wins, if at all, by margins.
Well, you're talking a little bit in the sense of a Kansas City type scenario. The Chiefs, over the past few years have won so many close call games, and but still yet went on to win Super Bowl.
Or like the Chicago Bears this year, who've won so many games late and don't have much. I mean, they had that Dallas blowout, and I can't think of any other ones that they had. But those kind of matchups.
Well, the thing that's most impressive between those two teams to me would be the New England Patriots. I think they've done a real job this football season here. I'm a big Mike Vrabel fan. Sean Payton gets the job done, but I think if those two teams met first week of the playoffs, I think depends upon whoever hosts.
Well, it would probably be later because you're talking about the 1 and 2 seeds. So let's say Denver. I think controls the number 1 seed right now, the tiebreaker edge over New England.
So if it were a championship game, and these two teams met, and it was, let's say where it is right now at Denver, okay, you'd have the Broncos would probably be a small 2.5 favorite in the football game, I would guess.
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
And assuming their paths to that game are relatively similar, and let's say they win games by, each win games from like 3 to 8 points or something like that.
Right. Greg, what's your thought on this?
I feel better with Denver because still you have to remember we have and the beginning of the season, we all looked at, and we have to do this every year. All right, who's got the easy schedule? Who has the hard schedule? Yeah. Well, this is no coincidence that the two teams with the easiest schedules are the Patriots and the Niners. And look at their seasons they're having. Even with all the injuries that the Niners have had, they still have 9 wins this year. And when you look at the Patriots, they've played only one team with a winning record in their last 8 games. That was the slumping Tampa Bay Bucks. Now, look, they've taken care of business, and nobody's discrediting that. But the question is, who do I feel more comfortable with? Well, because of that, I feel more comfortable with Denver because Denver's also won 3 out of 4 games outright as the dog. So they've proven that they could beat quality teams where in multiple quality teams, whereas the Patriots, even though they've had a very good season, they had the big win over Buffalo. Basically, that's all they've done. So I want to see a little bit more proof with the Patriots that they can beat more than just Buffalo. And especially, this will be the first time that this group will be in the playoffs. That's another thing. Denver at least got their feet wet a little bit last year. So all those things I think definitely help.
Well, I think the other part of the comparison is that Buffalo played in a relatively weaker division than does Denver, with Kansas City and the Chargers as their main challengers, and Buffalo really as the main challenger to New England.
Yeah, the softer division for the Patriots, for sure, which leads to the strength of schedule difference in between the two football teams. But you do bring out a real good point there, Greg, about the Denver Broncos taking on a much tougher schedule than the New England Patriots. We're going to find out all about New England this week after they host Buffalo. Now, if they don't win the game, it'll highlight and lighten up what you just said even more. If they get blown out in the football game, it'll be, what have we got in here? We have a pretender as opposed to a contender. We're going to find out all of that this Sunday. Guys, before we wrap up the show,
excuse me, Mark, I just want to point out one quick thing about looking, because I got the numbers in front of me.
Yes.
The 11 wins that Denver has had this year came against teams that are 46 and 85 against the rest of the league, excluding the game against Denver. New England also winning 11 games, and this surprisingly, their record's actually slightly better, 50 and 82 against against teams that did not play New England. That's what the teams at New England. So New England, they're both lousy records, but New England's is less lousy in their 11 wins than is Denver's in their 11.
Greg, if we had that graphics guy right now, when Andy said that, there would be a big sign on the screen that would say exposed. The Denver Broncos exposed for their schedule and the quality of opponents that they've beat. So I guess it kind of beats down.
My answer to the question would be Denver, because I like teams that have confidence that if they fall behind, unless the Giants game perhaps is the most bizarre example, that they have the ability and have shown the ability to come back and win so many of those games.
Well, guys, before we get out of here, I want to answer here a couple of things. Number one, Trend Tacklers brings out a great point about Mike Tomlin at home, 22-4 straight up on Monday nights. That's a really, really strong number. He's been there, done that before. But we've also got Ronnie has commented upon this is what I want to get out of here with, is the farce that was the Denver Bronco football game last week. And he mentions the point that, Greg had that. He's sure he's sick. He's still sick. I watched the replay on that. I didn't get to see it when it happened, but I watched the replay, guys. And I'm not stretching the point any none whatsoever. That wasn't even close to a delay of game. Not
exactly.
Not even close.
He got up like every other receiver does who makes contact with a guy who's down on the ground. He wasn't taunting him or pointing at him. He was trying to get out of the way.
And
it took like 2 seconds. Yeah.
Now you know why people talk about rigged games and
Pete Carroll's explanation was just as bizarre. If we thought we kicked the field goal, there'd still be a second on the clock. We can make an onside kick, recover it, and run it into the end zone. Come on, Pete.
And the fucked up thing is that if you think about it, there were I know there were others, but for me, there were 2 really bad beats this year.
By the way, that one affected both the side and the total. The Denver
That's true.
Game.
It did.
Who was the other one, Greg?
In college. That was when Indiana decided to run 45 yards in the opposite direction to get a safety when all they had to do was throw the ball out of bounds.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I got beaten on both of them. Okay. And it beat bad. It wasn't just, that was just a game. Happened to be like two of my most important games that I needed that week. Happened to be 2 of the worst beats of the season. So
what about that game, the overturned touchdown pass in the Ravens-Steelers game that effectively affected the outcome of that game straight up?
How on God's green earth could they not call it a touchdown? My goodness.
By the way, my complaint is not with the officials on the ground who called it a touchdown. It's the people in the booth who couldn't see the obvious and then made the reversal.
Yep. Aren't all we supposed to see is the player break the plane with the ball in his hand, touchdown, right?
He's got to make, I think they said, a football move. And maybe, I couldn't really tell, but maybe what they saw was that the ball was dropped in between the second foot getting down and the third foot, which would be the first step of the football move.
That might be the most mysterious jargon there is in the NFL, a football move.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows what a football move is, especially the people up in New York, Roger Goodell's crew. Define clearly what a football move is, because we're seeing
It depends on the ticket in your pocket, whether it says Westgate or not, or
exactly
Circa
right.
or not, or you know what I'm saying there.
Exactly. Well, guys, I got to get out of here. It's been a great show here this week, and we're going to get in deeper into the college football bowl games next week. God willing, Jim Feist takes a turn for the better, and he's feeling good up to it next week. I'm looking forward to visiting with Jim once again on the show. So for Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas, Jim Feist, the legend himself in Vegas, and our producer extraordinaire, Greg DePalma from Prime Sports Network. Until next week, once again, this is Mark Lawrence reminding you to always remember to bet with your head, not over it, and good luck.